Looking for a new mic to record your podcast with? In this video, we're going to talk about the number one most common mistake that I see podcasters make when they're choosing a new microphone. Even if you do your research with blogs and reviews, you'll even find that they recommend you make this mistake. I'm going to explain what this mistake is and advise what you should do instead if you want clear, professional sounding vocal recordings. Before we start, I want to make you aware quickly that there's a link in the description below to clarioncast.com/kickstart. Go there and download our free Podcast Kickstart mini ebook. It goes over what we're talking about today, as well as everything else that you need to get set up to record exceptional sounding podcasts. When you do research on microphones for podcasting and other vocal recordings like streaming, it's really common to find the Blue Yeti as a recommendation, or the Yeti Nano, other variations of that product. Or you may choose to let the online retailers like Amazon do the legwork and hope that when you search for podcast mic, it will serve you up something based on the reviews and based on tags and things that is suitable for your podcast. And this is understandable. Podcasting is huge. You'd expect there to be some good information out there. But unfortunately, this isn't always the case. And here comes the mistake. The Blue Yeti and those cheap podcast mics, or even not so cheap ones that often come up when you search on Amazon and other retailers, are condenser microphones, which is a type of microphone. It's the type of technology that's used inside the microphone. And for most podcasters, condenser mics will not get them a professional sound. This is because condenser mics, like those cheap Amazon mics or even the Blue Yeti, they're really sensitive. They're designed for recording things in recording studios with treated rooms and not for recording with in your office or your bedroom or kitchen diner. They pick up a lot of the room sound because they're so sensitive. So that's the reverb, the echo that comes off of your walls, the people speaking in the next room over, a dryer or fan on in the background. They pick up a lot of this background noise, and the way they're marketed, the way they're designed is to be easy to use so that you can just sort of plonk them on your desk and wherever it's pointing, it will pick you up. But this is the problem. It's easy to use because it's not very directional and it's very sensitive. But if you want this professional sounding, intimate recording, they're less than ideal. And a lot of these mics on Amazon that come up that say they're podcasting mics, they look the part, but they're very cheap. They've got very cheap components in, and they have a lot of internal noise as well. So regardless of what's going on around you, they just make a lot of white noise that your recordings will pick up. And they're often very tinny as well, very bright and harsh to listen to. So what's the alternative? Well, I'm not saying you need to go out and spend loads of money on a professional microphone. Absolutely not. The Blue Yeti isn't even particularly cheap, and it doesn't give you the best result. There are other cheaper microphones that give you a better result, and it's the technology that's used inside. So rather than a condenser microphone, you want to be looking for a dynamic microphone, particularly for those in untreated rooms like an office or like just a room in your house that you've set up for podcasting. Dynamic mics are less sensitive, meaning you'll have to position them a little closer than a condenser mic, but it's much easier to get this warm, intimate, professional sound regardless of which room you're in than with a condenser mic. And I know that's easy enough to say, but what does it actually sound like? Well, I've been recording this video today on an Audio-Technica 2100X, which is a dynamic microphone. It can be connected via USB, and it's not too expensive. I think it's about £80 new. I got it on eBay for half that, significantly less expensive than a Blue Yeti. But again, for the majority of podcasters, it's much easier to get that warm professional sound that you'd expect to hear from some of the more high-end podcasts out there. Now, I am in an acoustically treated room at the moment, but let's hear what it sounds like in a different room, one that's completely not ideal for recording in. Recording with that same dynamic microphone in the worst recording environment I could think of, the bathroom, and you can hear that it still sounds pretty close and not echoey like you'd expect. It still sounds good. The room doesn't make as huge of a difference as it does with a condenser microphone. If I move my microphone away right now, you'll get kind of an impression of what it typically sounds like when a recording's a little bit less warm and intimate and close. And this is often what you get with these condenser microphones. And also, because they're less sensitive, it's great for podcasters and streamers because they don't pick up as much of the desk taps and things like that. If you bump your table or anything like that, it's not quite as obtrusive with a dynamic mic typically. So why is the market flooded with all these cheaply made condenser mics? Well, I think it's probably a couple of reasons, not sure entirely, but I think firstly it's because they might be cheaper to make, and also they're, again, really easy to use because you don't have to worry so much about where it's positioned, whereas with a dynamic mic you do have to try and roughly keep your head and the mic in the same position throughout the recording. So a little bit more tricky to use, but if it's going to get you a much better result, then it's worth it. And there's so much content out there at the moment that it's quite easy to get your audio sorted out and put yourself above a lot of the other podcasts in your field in terms of professionalism, at least. Well, tell me that now, why don't you? I've just gone and bought a Blue Yeti, I hear you say. Don't worry, I'm not suggesting that you have to go out and spend more money on another brand new microphone. There's nothing wrong with using a Blue Yeti or any condenser microphone. Condenser microphones are used extensively for vocal recordings in the professional audio space. It's just that they're not ideal for non-professional studio spaces. But there are things you can do if you do have a condenser microphone like a Blue Yeti to improve your sound just based on what you do with your room and your positioning. And I'm going to go over that in just a moment. If you have a super cheap condenser mic from Amazon which has loads of internal noise, there's not a huge amount you can do with that. There are denoise tools, and if you have a podcast editor then they'll be able to sort it out as best as possible. But the most important thing is you're getting content out there anyway. So while I do teach constantly how important audio quality is, especially today when there's so much other content out there, it is still important just to go for it and not wait until you've got the perfect setup. Regardless, I'm going to give you a couple of tips on how to set up your microphone, particularly if you do have a condenser microphone that's sounding a bit roomy and a bit spacious, how you can make the most out of what you have. Firstly, make sure that you have the capsule of the microphone pointing the right direction. You might have to look in your instruction manual for this if it's not completely obvious. But what I mean by the capsule is some mics, your typical kind of Singer handheld mic that you'd see with the ball on the end, probably have the capsule pointing from the top, so you'd point it directly at your mouth like that. A side address microphone like this one and many other condenser microphones, they have the capsule this side, so you want to be pointing this side towards your mouth. If you point it here, it's technically going to be recording my computer screen right now. And it's hard to notice because, like I said, they are very sensitive condenser microphones and they will pick you up anyway. It's not like a laser beam, the way it picks up audio, but it will sound more intimate and clear if you're pointing it in the right direction. You also want to get a bit closer to the microphone. You don't really want more than about 6 inches or 2 hand widths between the end of the mic capsule and your mouth. Again, this is another problem with some of these sort of streamer microphones where they'll ship it with a desk stand. You put it on your desk and it's maybe 12 inches from your mouth, maybe it's not even pointing in the right direction because it's just sitting there on your desk. If it's a bit difficult getting the right height, so it's pointing at your mouth, you might need to invest in a mic stand or a boom arm so that you can lift the mic up and position it pointing at your mouth. And don't worry about it. If you're filming a podcast or you're streaming, it doesn't matter if the microphone shows on the camera. It shows you've got a professional setup. And I'm sure your listeners will appreciate more that you have really nice sounding audio than that there's a mic sort of poking in the corner of the video feed. Also, you want to get yourself a pop filter or windshield, which blocks the windy plosive sounds that you get from p and b sounds in your mic that make horrible sort of windy, bassy distortion noises. Most mics these days will have one built in, or it will have like a metal grill, but for me they never seem to quite do the job, especially when you want to get the mic quite close. So I'd just get one of these big foam balls as well and stick it on the end. And then in terms of the room that you're recording in, there are things you can do. You can obviously turn things off that are making a noise if possible. Nice big heavy curtains and soft furnishings. You can even get some of the foam panels quite cheap, like I've got behind me, just deadening the reverb and echo in the room as much as possible. Audio quality is really important in retaining listeners for your podcast or your YouTube videos. It's more pleasant to listen to. There's a kind of psychological effect as well when you have this kind of warm, intimate recording of being more engaged with the content that you're listening to. It comes across as more professional and that you've put more care in. That's why I just wanted to share this important tip with you today. If you don't have a mic yet and you're looking for one for your podcast, I've left links in the description to a couple at different price ranges, some budget ones in there, including the one I'm using now, which I recommend to my clients. Let me know in the comment section below, what mic are you using for your content? Or if you have found that some of these tips have been useful when you're changing things around in your room, it'd be great to hear what you've done and if it's helped. And for more audio recording and production tips and guides, then hit that subscribe button. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.